The Oversight Committee has taken 2 weeks of testimony on the COVID-19 backlog, and we have developed this legislation as a fix to this critical problem the Oversight Committee has been studying. Good oversight is when you identify problems and work to solve them together. If my bill were passed before the legislature, likely adjourns later this month, it would provide over 1,600 more appointments at each of the 130 branch locations in Michigan during the months of July, August, and September. Lastly, I just want to note that COVID caused the backlog we face right now, which is why our bills would utilize federal COVID relief funding from the American Rescue Plan to fund these overtime hours and deliver the customer service our residents need and deserve. Thank you again for being with us today to learn more about this legislation. And now I would like to turn it over to my good colleague, Representative Julie Brixey.
Thank you so much for having me here today, and thank you very much for working with me, Representative Young and Secretary Benson. And thanks to everybody who's joined us here. I'm also hoping that our bills will be referred to the House Oversight Committee because the bills need to be vetted within the context of the hearings that the Oversight Committee has held over the past 2 weeks. We need to get more appointments available as soon as possible so that it makes sense that the committee that understands this issue thoroughly would be the one vetting the bills. Collectively, our bills were developed to provide 500,000 more appointments through the end of the current fiscal year. The bill I introduced, House Bill 4947, would provide 200 more full-time staff across our 130 branch locations in Michigan through the end of the current fiscal year, which ends on September 30th. If my bill were passed before the legislature likely adjourns later this month, it would provide 290,000 more appointments for Michigan residents in July, August, and September to address the COVID-19 backlog. Each of these employees can help provide nearly 1,500 appointments during these 3 months. One of the most common complaints we've heard about Secretary of State branches over the past several decades is that the branches are understaffed. Residents go in and they see all the vacant windows that are not staffed. What residents often don't know is that many of the branches were built when the Secretary of State's budget was nearly double what it is today. The cuts the legislature has made to Secretary of State branch staffing is why we see so many empty counters in our branches today. Specifically, the legislature has cut SOS branch staffing by 40%, and they eliminated 46% of branch locations over the past few decades. During this same time period, the state's population has grown by 10%, and we've seen a 25% increase in the number of vehicles registered in our state. Secretary Benson has done a phenomenal job upgrading the Secretary of State IT systems and kiosks across the so people do most business with ease online, via mail, or at proves this as only 26% of transactions were conducted by mail, online, or kiosks in 2018 before she was elected. As of last year, Secretary Benson's improvements have resulted in 60% of transactions being conducted via mail, online, and at the kiosks. A staggering increase in just her first 2 years in office by expanding what you can do without having to come to a branch. And we know Secretary Benson is just getting started as she's working on many more improvements to reduce the number of times we have to visit an actual branch. This data demonstrates that the Secretary of State Benson is doing everything she can to modernize the office so people aren't needlessly waiting for long periods at branch offices due to the archaic systems and the budget being nearly cut in half. However, we still have to address this significant backlog caused by COVID. I want to make it clear that this problem of COVID-19 backlog in the Secretary of State Business and Renewals was caused by the legislature. The Secretary of State's office warned lawmakers early in 2020, when the first extensions were being discussed and ultimately passed, that this would likely happen. Then they were renewed all the way through March 31st of this year. During each extension, the Secretary of State warned lawmakers about the potential for this backlog to become a problematic issue. And then even with the repeated warnings, lawmakers chose to let the 13 months worth of extensions, March 1st of 2020 through March 31st of 2021, expire all at once, creating an unprecedented demand for conducting business at SOS branches. We've never been in a situation where the Secretary of State's office has been forced to process a 13-month backlog on top of their normal business, much less requiring them to meet this unprecedented demand with huge staff reductions. As legislators, our job is to identify problems and work with the parties involved to solve them. The legislature created the COVID-19 backlog by allowing all the extensions to expire at once. We then identified the problem through the House oversight hearings, and Rep. Young and I came up with a solution by working with the Secretary of State. It's our job as legislators to implement these solutions to deliver the additional customer services the residents of Michigan need coming out of COVID, which is why we're hoping our bills will be referred to the House Oversight Committee. The House Oversight Committee posted its agenda earlier today with no business before the committee. With no urgent business before the committee, I'm hopeful our bills will receive a hearing this week. With that, I'd like to turn it back over to Secretary of State Benson if she has any final comments before we open it up for questions.
Thank you, Representative Brixey and Representative Young, for your partnership and for your recognizing the data behind the challenges we face and our opportunities to solve them together. With that, I believe we have a few minutes for questions, and I'll turn it over to Jake Rollo to moderate them.
Yeah, first of all reporters, if you would, please enter your name and the name of your outlet in your title. If you are unable to do so, please put it in the chat and we will do so. We'll only take questions from folks whose names and outlets we know. We have until 2:45 and then we have a hard stop today. Sergio Martinez with Bridge, your hand is up. So you get the first question. Other reporters, please raise your electronic hands if you would like to ask a question. Sergio, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Jake, and thank you, representatives and Secretary Benson. I have a couple of questions here. So Representative Brixey, you talked about how your bill would allow the creation of 200 more positions, I guess, full-time positions through the end of the fiscal year. Are you envisioning those positions to be permanent? So like by next fiscal year that those 200 employees are still going to be offering or helping in the Secretary of State's office? And also, can we talk a little bit about how much money are the bills appropriating, if they are appropriating some funding? And I guess the last question, and I just want to make sure I got all of them in, for Secretary Benson, when we talk about potentially extending the hours of the branches, are we talking about bringing back the weekend appointments or weekend services?
I'll take those last two, and Representative Brixey, I'll turn it over to you for the other. The cost that we're asking to be allocated out of the really extraordinary surplus that's coming to Michigan through the federal COVID funding is $200 million to hire additional staff and $5 million to allow for additional hours, which is overtime essentially under state rules for that limit how many hours people can work per week. And so that would enable us to explore options like evening and weekend times, as well as increasing the capacity of our current hours. And so I think that answers both of the second and third question. And Representative Brixey, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Benson, and thank you for this question. So to answer the question, we did not plan for the 200 positions to be permanent. And however, due to the chronic understaffing of the office that's gone on over the years, I think we could look at it as a pilot program if the secretary were interested in altering the hours and providing different efficiencies or conveniences for residents. I would certainly be open to that. This funding specifically is federal funding for COVID relief dollars, and so it's not coming out of the regular general fund. The second question was, are there dollar amounts attached to this? And the answer is yes. Representative Young's bill would be $5 million. And my bill has a different price tag. And I'm going to say the number, but I want you to remember before I say the number that the dollar amount is for an entire year. And we'll only be using it for about a third of the year. So the 1 year cost of those 200 FTEs is $20 million. It would be roughly $7 million. There probably are some one-time costs associated with this, but that's the way that we chose to present the information rather than trying to figure out all of the minutia of the how many weeks it would be and all of those details. This gets enough money. And again, both of these bills are utilizing federal COVID relief funding. Any other questions?
Dave Boucher with the Detroit Free Press. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Secretary. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. Can anyone speak to conversations you've had with House leadership about this measure? I know several people have mentioned that you hope the Oversight Committee takes this up, but has anyone worked with Republicans or anyone in leadership on this bill or gotten any feedback?
I have talked to the chair about this bill package and asked the chair if he would consider giving it a hearing, the chair of our committee. I talked to a number of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle about this. I have not had the opportunity to have a meeting with Speaker Wentworth yet, as we came up with the idea for the bills at the first hearing and dropped the bills at the second hearing a week later. It was pretty remarkable to be able to get this priority put in the way that we did. And I will be following up with leadership to pursue this and also to talk to the appropriations chair and the governor's budget person as well.
Just to clarify again, I misspoke earlier. It's 20 million that would go to staff, 5 million that would enable us to expand hours through overtime allowances for a total of $25 million. And I will also be talking with folks both in the legislature and also talking directly to the governor. I think this is it's a real solution that enables us to be forward-looking and invest in what the needs of the department are, as opposed to just simply trying to reshuffle the deck chairs in a way that won't lead to any problem solving of an issue that's lasted in our department for.
Beth LeBlanc with the Detroit News. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thanks. If Representative Brixey, I know you said there was a possibility that you could look at these employees as, a permanent increase or what have you for the branch offices. Representative Albert has expressed concern about using the federal funding for things that would be an ongoing cost because it's a one-time kind of infusion of money into the state budget. I guess, is that why you guys aren't sending it to the Appropriations Committee, or what is the reason behind not sending it to them rather than Oversight?
Oversight understands the issue better than Appropriations because we just conducted hearings on this. Now, if you want to talk about how good oversight should be conducted, there are nonprofit agencies throughout the state that are actually offering oversight training. I would love to see us participate in it. But if you're going to do good oversight, really what you want to do is look at an issue, identify problems, and then come up with solutions and implement the solutions. And so that's why we chose to have the bills go to the Oversight Committee. Whether or not they end up there is a different question altogether. Sadly, we don't control the House, and so we don't get to choose which committees the bills will go to. And although Representative Albert has indicated that there are problems with, that he has concerns about using any of the federal funds for ongoing costs. This is why we have a 2-bill package. We have other bills that we could be introducing that we're talking about as well. And Representative Young's bill is an overtime bill, which would simply address the backlog that exists today. However, we have the caveat that we still are experiencing a pandemic and people still are becoming infected with COVID-19, which does still cause absences and problems with the number of staff that exist at the different branches today. So simply solving the problem with overtime, we thought might not fully address the issue given the current conditions that we're in with COVID.
I want to just add to that. And first, I want to thank Representatives Brixey and Young for just really sitting down with our staff and learning the issue quite well. It's really refreshing to work with legislators who are committed to simply just looking at the numbers, looking at the data, and coming up with solutions to solve the issue. And I say that because, as Representative Brixey very solution. We're going to continue working with legislators on long-term solutions, as I've done now for the past 2 years, to try
Okay, so it looks like the internet has cut out in the secretary's building. I sadly do not have control of this webinar. So I see we still have 20 participants. And I know that we were planning on a hard stop at 2:45 and we were just about wrapped up. So if anyone has any other questions, if they'd like to put them in the chat, we can try to perhaps answer one more question.
Thank you for that, Minority Vice Chair Julie Brixey. Appreciate you following up.
Okay, it looks like there aren't any other questions. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to thank Representative Young and thank Secretary Benson for participating today and putting this on. So I do see we have one question. When do you see the last possible time your bills would be able to get a hearing? I don't know if you mean the first possible time. Of course, the first possible time could be this week, and we don't have anything posted on the agenda. So Representative Johnson, Chair Johnson of the Oversight Committee could perhaps give us a hearing this week. The last possible times the bills could, latest possible time to where it's still effective for addressing the backlog of appointments. I guess as long as we're experiencing the backlog, and I don't believe that the secretary addressed this question in her remarks, but during the hearings, I do believe that the secretary thought that the backlog would be resolved by the end of the year without any additional changes being made to the to her funding for her offices. Next week would really be the last time that it would be practical for us to get a hearing, as we're going to have the 5-day layover rule for the Senate, and we will be presumably going on break the third week of June for the summer. So again, I want to thank everyone for participating. Representative Young, do you want to have any closing statements?
I will just say that, it's an honor and a privilege to serve the good people of the state of Michigan. This is why we do this work. We're all about solutions and problem solving. And so I'm really hopeful that our colleagues will understand the need to get this done. It's just three months. 3 months, we want to get things set up, level set, so that all of these great programs and ideas that our Secretary of State has to continue improving the department customer service, they'll be allowed to do that without this backlog hanging over them. So with that, I say thank you, Representative Brixey, and a special thank you to our Secretary Jocelyn Benson.
Okay, and I have put our cell phone in the chat, 517-281-6034. That's my Chief of Staff, Dan Opsimer. If anyone has any follow-up questions, I know that you all have also received a press release that has the Secretary's contact information on it. Feel free to contact us for any additional follow-up questions. Thank you so much, and I hope that everyone has a great day.